Hi everyone, Snowthony Daytano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of the new Weeknd album, After Hours. This is a new LP from singer, songwriter, producer, as well as he has done quite a bit of the production on this new album here, Abel Tesfaye, aka The Weeknd. For the past decade, Abel has not just been the most key voice to come out of R&B from Canada, but maybe the most key voice to come out of R&B, period. While I wouldn't say he was the first voice to embark upon what many have dubbed alternative R&B, he did usher it into the mainstream in a pretty big way, with his druggy, depressive brand of exploitative party anthems. But Abel went essentially from a critically acclaimed and tragic trilogy of mixtapes to a series of hit or miss studio albums, all of which so far have contained at least a great handful of highlights. While I'm not crazy about Starboy or Beauty Behind the Madness from front to back, both of those records do contain some of the best pop and R&B singles of the 2010s. But it would seem Abel is no longer content operating at that level because on his new effort here, he is reinventing himself, resurfacing with a new hairstyle, an edgy vintage look. So with that, I was wondering maybe Abel's sound will be overhauled on this record as well, something that embodies his new persona and direction. But it was nearly impossible to forecast this record's sound based off of the singles. There's Heartless, which is a great track, but it sounds like your typical Weeknd affair, but it's boiled down to a very simple pop structure with a chorus so strong it's on roids. Blinding Lights, though, is a total change of course, a surprise 80s throwback, of which there are quite a few on this thing, but it as well has a strong tune and features one of Abel's most charismatic vocal performances ever. I say whoopsh. Then there's a lot of dance pop nods and a tension-building intro on the title track, and expansive structure and some extra mile sound design as well. So based on these tracks, all of which are good, what are we getting on this record? Is it an 80s thing? Is it your usual Weeknd thing? Is it like an art pop, exploratory, multi-phased R&B epic progressive thing? The production list is kind of a head scratcher too, as yes, Abel does take part in the instrumentals here quite a bit, but also Max Martin is on here, One O Tricks Point Never, Metro Boomin, Ilangelo, and while stylistically all these decisions lead to one of Abel's most all-over-the-place track lists, I still think After Hours is Abel's most enjoyable commercial record yet. It does come with a rough start though. The first track, Alone Again, it does come with some cool synth passages, but the mix leaves a lot to be desired. Mostly because Abel is so buried, so distant, his voice is so heavily processed too. There's different portions of the instrumental too that don't really segue all that creatively. The trap beat that eventually dropped is really plain, but part of me thought, okay, maybe all this junk is going on because it's an intro track, it's a taster, it's trying to be dramatic, maybe it's just playing a little hard to get, but no. The next track, Too Late, suffers from a lot of the same problems too. The vocals, again, are so touched up and so manipulated, they barely sound like Abel. He sounds like, not The Weeknd, he sounds like The Weekday. And now it's happening over this two-step beat that sounds like a leftover from the last Disclosure LP, I don't know. But then immediately after this song, it's like a night and day difference. On the track Hard to Love, Abel's voice is clear, it's up front, it gleams like a moonbeam with moths dancing through it majestically. And the song itself is so sad and so cute, really giving me some Postal Service vibes. This is truly a song that Ben Gibbard would write. It also helps the instrumental is subtly glitchy and has a very heavy IDM slant as well, but the following Scared to Live is also really good, even though it comes from a very different place stylistically. The way this thing kicks off, it's a dramatic spotlit ballad. The vocals are gorgeous and there's a sheen on this cut that just kind of throws it back to the 80s. Good performance from Abel, and I love how the instrumentation gets a little thicker, a little more lush as the whole thing progresses along, especially with those classic 80s drum fills and jerky, weird vocal sample bits. No idea what that is, but it still adds a lot of color to the track. The next few songs in the track list are not quite as tuneful, not as hooky, spooky, but they are still an okay vibe. There is Snow Child, where we hear Abel singing essentially about his progression pre-blowing up to now, telling us about how his lifestyle has changed over the years. And I suppose it has been a while since the original trilogy mixtape, so Abel has a lot to reflect on. Even though it's not a bad topic, I do wish the verse melody was better and that the chorus felt less like an afterthought. And from the tone of the lyrics to the beat that sounds like an If You're Reading This Leftover, the song Escape from LA kind of runs like your usual Drake wellness check. But at one point the track suddenly shifts into a dreamy diatribe about how Abel has everything he wants now, except you. Of course. There's a sex scene in the music studio. Not the greatest resolution of any story I've ever heard. Was another highlight for me in the track list, a multi-phased cut with a groovy and synth-heavy instrumental, another 80s sheen on this one too. Not to say Abel is continuously ripping off new wave in a horrible way across this record, it's just a sound and style that I think he realizes as well, that his usual aesthetic maps over so easily and so efficiently without having to change things up too much. It just works. But yes, the more lush and dreamy portions of this track are gorgeous. I love the cinematic outro as well, where Abel is kind of narrating his own addiction to this fast lifestyle that he can't stop writing songs about. He can't get away from it. He's losing faith as a result of that. It's pretty dramatic. The song In Your Eyes is another new wave number, one of the strongest here. A bumpin' beat, great song, some MJ vibes coming off the vocals, and a strong sax solo over the bridge. Save Your Tears is a milder cut in this vein as well, but still a highlight. I have to admit, I love the pumping synths on this track quite a bit. They feel like something you would typically hear out of a lost European synth pop obscurity. It's funny how deeply into this sound Abel is digging for ideas and just coming out with gems, because he easily could have taken the lazy route and just done some bad 80s pop pastiche for one track after another, and he didn't. However, I thought the Repeat After Me interlude was a huge drop in quality, pretty much reminded me of exactly why I didn't like the first two tracks here. After Hours, the title track, is a pretty powerful placement toward the end of this record, and Until I Bleed Out, I suppose, is an okay closer. Certainly a stronger moment than the intro track, but Abel spends a lot of time building this track up too, only for the very slow motion beat and pain vocals to meet a pretty abrupt end. Still, overall, I thought After Hours was a pretty good album. There are a handful of tracks that either I don't care for or I thought sort of killed the momentum of the record, but this album contains some of Abel's most catchy and infectious works yet. And not to downplay the groundbreaking sounds and ideas he forged during that mixtape era, but After Hours isn't just sounding good, it's sounding like a new beginning. I'm feeling a light to decent 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, The Weeknd, forever.